lovely people. Thank you, Chris, for checking in on our audio. Appreciate that. So we are here to make some more board games, or ideate, concept some more board games, as it were. Hope everyone's week is going well. Start of the week. Having a pretty good Tuesday, pretty busy Tuesday. Making sure to hydrate, drink lots of fluids, because it's been pretty warm and dry here in Seattle. Have my got my unicorn glass, got my coffee, late afternoon coffee. All right. In case you're joining us for the first time, my name is Emma Larkins. On this show, I start from zero, have no idea where we're going to go with our design ideas. Together, we ideate, brainstorm a bunch of stuff, originally hone in on some sort of topic that we come up with, and talk about some ways to mechanize it and create a game using that idea. If anyone has challenges, design challenges, I'm willing to consider those within spec. Sometimes they can be a little crazy, but I always love a challenge. My watch is sticking to my microphone right now because it's magnetized. That's fun. And if anyone has a word that they want to start with for us to create our brainstorm, I've been thinking a lot about late summer / fall. It's been warm and nice here in Seattle. I know in the rest of the country there was a little bit of a heat wave a few weeks ago, but here it's just been nice. Yesterday I had to wear a long sleeve shirt because it got a little chilly late at night. So I like these flavors and concepts of the transition period between summer and fall. Just transition periods in general, kind of this concept of denouement in narrative terms, where you've had your exciting, your actions crescendoed, everything fun and bold has happened, and now you're just riding out that last wave, like you're surfing on the beach and you're riding that last wave home, and you're not quite to the end, but you're in the moment where you can see the end, see how it's all going to play out, and you kind of have a time for pause and reflection. I think reflection is a good word to start with for our mind mapping today. Reflection has a couple of different meanings, which is another fun reason it's a good word to ideate off of. We were talking about reflection in terms of looking inwards. Self-reflection. And there's also reflection as a concept for seeing yourself reflected or mirrored in something else. Mirrored, doubled. Late summer has me thinking of, says Chris, a return to regular rhythm, late warm nights, street fairs replaced with a state fair, social burnout, and pants. Yeah, that's a very Seattle thing. I think a lot of urban areas, in fact, where New York City was a little bit the same way. Where summer, you want to go, do, have your summer vacations, travel to the beach, travel to see family reunions. social burnout. And I think that can be wrapped into this concept of looking inwards and self-reflection with this idea of seasonality. And for a lot of people, summer is a season of connection. I guess I would say growth connection and growth. Because I feel like winter is a season of connection as well, but it's kind of a burrowing in. You're not going out as much. You're probably connecting more with people you already know, with family. Whereas the summer season of connectionality is a lot of going out to the beach, making new friends, a lot of transition, reflection, stillness after transition. And there's a nice little bit of a pause, preparation. Oftentimes when we're thinking about this concept of self-reflection, there's a concept of we're doing it in a between phase, before something that is yet to come, whether that is the transition, fall, winter. We're preparing for a time of coldness, stillness, processing, I think is another really important part of this. So if your summer has had a lot of stuff going on, a lot of change and transition a lot of the times, it's important to process everything that happened. Right? I think sometimes you can get into this go, go, go fervor. For me, summer, where I am here in my design career, there's a lot of traveling, doing a lot of work, going to a lot of board game conventions. Each of the board game conventions has a lot of preparation in the lead up to it. Then a lot of stuff happens at the convention. Meet a lot of people, talk to a lot of people, then come back, trying to recover from the conventions, and then lead up to another convention. So if you're go, 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 if you're doing a lot of stuff, you don't necessarily have time to sit down and think about what happened, put all the people you met, fix them into your brain, or the people I want to follow up with, or the relationships I want to nurture. It can be good to have to take a breath, to just sit with all of these thoughts and ideas. And let them simmer. Let them meld and reestablish your point of view. Because I think in this kind of chaotic summer, spring, growth, summer period, you can lose yourself sometimes. You can start to feel disconnected. And not that anything wrong or bad has happened. Growth can be a really good thing, but if a lot of it is happening at once, your external world is changing, your internal world is changing, and you can't process that you can't adjust properly to that without processing it and acknowledging that transition is happening. What did I say there that I wanted to write down? Reflection, transition. Hello, game biologist. Perfect timing. I'm at our annual staff meeting at work. Lots to talk about who we are, what we've done, where we need to go. You see, it's fascinating, right? That you would have a staff meeting at this time. I think what's really exciting about this time of year is the combination of energies. So you have your kind of frenetic, big energy summer rolling into what will eventually be the low energy hibernation of winter. So while you still have that the experience, the heat fresh in your mind, it can be a really good time to take that and work that into reflection. I think if you look at winter can be a time for reflection as well, but being potentially a little more low energy, you're less likely to be going out, hanging out with people, taking in new energy. It can be a better time to rest, right? If I'm thinking about the seasons and how I feel about them, there's the spring growth, summer expansion, fall reflection, winter rest, because you do need rest time as well, right? So, and it's very important to work rest into whatever you're doing. Rest should be a constant thing, but before you're ready to rest and pack things up and let things settle, I like this idea of reflection. So why are we talking about all of these kind of energy, emotion, thoughts, and ideas, and how does it relate to board game design? I think a lot of really interesting mechanics and concepts for game design come from unexplored places. What I like to do with these exercises is just talk about what I'm thinking about, what you're thinking about, wind all these things together and see how they could potentially be mechanized either in a role-playing game, in a storytelling game, in more traditional card or board game. I like some of these concepts that are coming out of this conversation, and I'm seeing visions here. This is what I think is really cool about the brainstorms is, start with a word, reflection, have this word mirrored coming off of this. And now I'm starting to think of mirrors as components. Still potentially tying into this conversation about what different energies are, and maybe we can talk about, what this component would do. This person has legs. Smile. Of course, mirrors are backwards. Look at that. So mirror isn't something that we see in a lot of game designs. I'm trying to think if I've played a game that has a mirror component. I can't think right off the top of my head. If you think of anything, let me know. But I like this idea of having something mirrored and potentially tying it into reflecting the inner self. Not just the outer self. A lot of times too, when you're trying to come up with new ideas and create something from nothing, which is what creativity is all about, sometimes you just have to prod at existing things and turn them on their side or turn them on their head a little bit and play the what if game. I really like this as a tool for getting unstuck when you're feeling uninspired and not having any particularly strong creative impulses. You might feel yourself mired in existing ideas. So, for example, trying to brainstorm what kind of designs you might want to make. Think, I want to make a bread game about kneading bread dough, and then you bake the bread, and then you sell the bread in a market. Could be a cool game. Could do some interesting things with the cards, but what if we started to blow that out and push out the boundaries a little bit for our theoretical bread game? You know, what if you're kneading the dough and you have a cool component like the squishy gel things, and there's a way to mechanize that? Or what if the bread is fairy bread and it gives people magical powers when they eat it? Or what if your bakery isn't in a village or a house, but instead it's in a cloud castle or it's in a dungeon, right? How might that affect the game? So I think it's a great inspiration for creativity to take whatever ideas you have and then start to throw all sorts of weird things out there. And a lot of this stuff is not going to help. A lot of these things aren't going to become reality, but by going down this path, we will land on something, on that aha moment that we wouldn't have gotten to otherwise. Senior Bob, hey M Dizzle, how's it going? Good to see you. Chris says there's probably some puzzle meat to having to do something mirrored. Yeah, so this is, put some like shine lines on this. This is actual mirror shining component, but above and beyond the idea of a actual mirror. Yeah, this idea of mirroring, where you might have two things. You're trying to draw a reflection of a shape, for example. Oh my gosh. This is making my brain work in weird ways, which is cool, which is a good part of this exercise. So if you're trying to draw a mirrored image, for example, what if there's some sort of a boundary between the two images? Do an eyeball with a cross through it. What if you can't see the other one? You're trying to explain. Trying to explain a concept backwards. I don't know what that means yet, but I like the sound of it. Gamologist, we got to meet our diversity, equity, inclusion officer, and it put me in a mind of how you see yourself and how you're seen by others, which is true, or is every version of you subjective? I really like this as a concept and as a component of self-reflection. Because when you are doing this self-reflection and you're looking at all of your thoughts, all of your experiences that you've recently had, and you're trying to process them, what's important to realize is everything you see about yourself is seen through a lens. And write that in caps because it's very important. When we are doing this self-reflection and we're thinking about ourselves, sometimes we fall into a trap of thinking in absolute terms, like I am X, I am Y, or thinking about what we've experienced and what we've perceived other people saying or doing in relation to ourselves and making absolute judgments from that. from the experiences we've had. Start to make absolute judgments based on what others have said and done. Attributing emotions, thoughts, perceptions to others' actions. I definitely fall into this trap a lot. I also want to write down before I forget. Mirroring what someone else thinks about you. I definitely fall into this trap of attributing intentions. I think that's the word that I was looking for. To others' behavior. So someone might say something that I interpret in a certain way. Like someone might respond very quickly to something. Somebody might misinterpret what I'm saying and have a reaction based on that. Someone might appear to be very friendly or not very friendly, and it's easy to base our interpersonal relationships on this moment-to-moment data. Moment-to-moment interpretations. Because it's not data, right? That's very important to point out. This is stuff perceiving. We're seeing this through a lens. So you might have reactions to these interactions. Like, oh, so-and-so must really like me, or must be a really good friend of mine because they did X. You know, they bought me a snack, or they sat next to me, or they hung out with me, so we must have a very strong relationship. Or so-and-so didn't respond to my message, or didn't bring me a snack, or didn't share a thing with me, and attributing all of these emotions to these things that are happening when it's assumptions, right? Anything you attribute as someone else's emotional state, they haven't directly said as assumptions. Even if they do try and spell it out or say something specifically about their interactions with you, it can still be a perception, right? There's still the potential for miscommunication. So it's a very rich interactive soil there for us to dig around in with how we react to others and how we perceive those interactions. And what we do as a result, right? We might, because you can have very real actions in the world based on these perceptions, right? Like, so-and-so shared their snack with me, and so we must be good friends, and so I'm going to invite them out to this thing, right? Or, so-and-so didn't respond to this thing, oh, they must be avoiding me, I'm not going to invite them to this thing. And thus have this like escalating or de-escalating spirals of connection. Game Bowler says, ooh, what about using actual lenses as components? I like where your head's at. Colored lenses that let you see only parts of the printing on the card, sort of like the red filter sheets used for things like decrypto. Yeah, filters. We got a lot of good stuff coming down. I will make some more notes here. Filters, lenses, mirrors. A lot of fun stuff to play around with there. Lenses, mirrors. I like the colored screens revealing partial information. Or partially occluded. Occluded see-through components. So you could see if you're trying to communicate or send a message to a team member or an opponent. You would only get part of the information through. You could do it on a word-by-word basis, which might be interesting. But it would be cool to mechanize chunking the meaning of something. I think this is something that Decrypto does in a very interesting way. Chris says, these are challenging topics for my adult brain to navigate after many attempts to level up. This is a game that has me thinking of a co-op where the win rate is 0.5%. Ooh, punishing. Misinterpreted Intent, the board game. Okay, I believe we have our title. Thank you very much, Chris. That is an excellent title for our stream for today. Always like to come up with our filler stand-in game names for the games we come up with on the streams, and that is a good one. The game. Alright, so we have some interesting ideas floating around here. Misinterpretation, partial information, communication, lots of Asian words. So we can dig in a little bit now. So we can go to the obvious answer, right? Like, this is a word game where we're trying to communicate, pass information back and forth. But I'm interested to do a sidebar here and talk about the different kinds of things that we could communicate and the different types of information that we could transmit. All right, let us see here. Let's make a list. So words, shapes, and a lot of this will be in the form of words, sentences, shapes, concepts. So if you're trying to guess something, it could be one for one. It's like, oh, I'm trying to get you to guess a words like a noun, like a physical object. Concepts, more like in the game concept. Numbers. Emotions. We had talked a few weeks ago about a game where you're actually making faces to try and communicate emotions. I thought that was pretty cool. There's things we can do non-verbally to communicate. Symbols. So we could transmit these concepts like a triangle with a tree. Logic symbols like plus, minus, equals. images. So just full-on pictures of a scenario. That could be interesting if you did have a scene or a scenario, like a island, some water, there's a sailboat there, maybe a palm tree, and a person. And if they were in different colors, get on my fancy color markers here, you might be able to hide and reveal different parts with the different filters, which could be cool. Big, chunky, blocky filters. Yeah, so you wouldn't have the outlines here, right? If the boat was pink and then you put the pink filter on there, you might cover up the boat so you don't see it. I'm gonna go to my next page to create this. I'm like, oh, I could actually reproduce this with my transparency, with my lamination sheets are see-through here. I got a little bag here, that might work. Take apart a clear sleeve. That's what I need. I like yes. I have some clear sleeves here. Very handy. We're gonna do it live. See if we can come up with some weird prototypes. It's probably not gonna work at all, but yeah. So you have your boat here completely in one color. Then your ocean underneath the boat. And then your sheet, yeah, this is the marker unfortunately is not going to stick onto here because this is on a matte sleeve. If it was a matte sleeve it might work, but you kind of get the concept there. Pull this down so I can see my boat. Yeah. That was actually sticking on there, you could create filters to partially occlude the information. What about using all 5 senses? Synesthesia, the game. What does a triangle taste like? I do love that as a sidebar. Creating this could even combine the topics, right? Just creating a shared synesthesic language. Trying to share that language. Having it misinterpreted. Getting from misinterpretation to correct interpretation. That's some cool stuff there. Chris says, so there's this game that I've observed in early potential relationships that I call the couch game. Ooh, sounds spicy. Where two people who aren't interested in each other will naturally gravitate towards each other in seating position on a couch, inching bit by bit as they shift. Whereas if only one is closing the gap, it takes longer. It's not a game, it's an informal metric for interest/comfort. Maybe there's something to modeling communication matchups with a physical track. I like this idea of a relationship game for romantic or friendship or any sort of friendship, partnership, one or more people, establishing connections of bonding distance. physical distance, your emotional connectedness represented by physical closeness. Color markers. Yeah, I got my colors over here. Break them out for special occasions. One of Glory. Hey Emma, your commander deck looks sweet. Yeah, thanks for the sidebar. Wonderful Glory is being generous here. My commander deck is life gain horse tribal. For those of you who don't know too much about Magic the Gathering, creature types, there's certain creature types that work very well together. They have a lot of cards within the game that synergize very powerfully. Horses don't actually have that. There's like one card that works with other horses. So it's a very difficult thing to make work. But it's fun. I have a lot of foil cards in my deck, and I like to do weird, off-the-grid, silly things. So thanks for checking out Wonderful Glory and for your kind words. Triangles taste like red. I feel... I like... Oh, man. I'm like, I'm going to copy this because Senor Bob, your name shows up as red. And I think that I love that it shows up as red and you're saying red. It's like a cool synergistic thing. Wonderful Glory says, reminds me of the Jackbox game where you date monsters, sending messages to see if you can get a sense of where people are at. Where people are at makes me think of positioning, triangulation. This is cool. So it's splitting off a little bit from this partial communication idea, but still within the realm of what we're talking about here. You have a triangle, person 1, person 2, person 3, so this is represented physically, and all these things say they're on a spectrum, on a scale, 1 to X for each. I guess this would come out on both sides. As so, as so. And there's different gradations and moving of your relationship marker. So perhaps over time you can move towards or away from the other person. I'm going to say something generic like, I like ice cream. Time towards or I like ice cream test. I also like ice cream. So this is concept of a shared interest, kind of a generic view of relationship building. Forgot my N. Relationship building, where you like someone because they like the same thing as you. Move your relationship marker based on getting the same answers. Yeah, so this could be, if we have our scales here. Oh, this is interesting, right? Because they would be moving. So if these were physical, either strings where you're moving things along, like a knotted string would be cool. Or see-through flexible plastic. So again, to our markers on a piece of laminated, like a laminated marker sheet. So you would have your knotted strings moving and intersecting with the knots lining up. Each time you created a stronger bond, your knots would move closer to each other. This is weird. I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but it looks cool. What are other ways of establishing or reinforcing other than shared interests? Understanding someone, acknowledging someone, sharing a personal story, talking about your history. So even if you don't share something, or even if you don't feel the same way about something, there's still a lot of other ways you can create bonds with someone. It's like, even if you don't have the same history, just talking about it can make you feel closer to another person. In general, an action response interaction. You offer something, the other person responds to your offer. Could even be abstracted. The abstract relationship game, where you're not necessarily delving into emotional interpersonal connection, but yeah, shapes or something, like back to the synesthesia, like I think triangles are red, and someone's like, I think triangles taste like strawberries, and triangulating based on that. We got a lot of triangles happening today. Wonder what that's all about. Maybe that's where that's coming from, because strawberries kind of look like triangles. That's why they would be red. Jack in the Box, you date monsters, literal monsters, or figurative monsters. They act as a delivery mechanism for salsa. That's fair. Game Knowledge says, speaking of reflection and triangulation, I had a job in college doing radio telemetry for pheasants. Of course you did. That's amazing. I love that. And your strongest signal would always be directly toward the target and directly away from the target. The way to tell the correct direction was to move and see if the signal got stronger or weaker, which is cool, which also reminds me of my Symphonalia video game that I worked on a while back where it's totally sound-based, your navigation. You're trying to move towards certain points based on how the sound gets louder or quieter, which is cool. Sort of a high-tech, hotter, colder game. Yeah. Hotter, colder. That could work, too, this concept. Hot or cold, moving towards or away by degrees. Yes. Fog of Love. Fog of Love has this thing where each party is presented a question and secretly selects an answer. Various meters move up and down depending on alignment. You obviously get deeper than we both like ice cream because that's what the game is about, but it's a similar thing. Add this into what we're thinking about here. Okay. Alright, so we got a lot of stuff going on here, friends. Let's do a little recap of where we're at. For those of you who might just be joining us as we concept and come up with game design ideas from scratch. Wow. It's like weird to even say where we are right now. We got a bunch of bizarre diagrams here everywhere. Everything from people on the beach. We were talking about occluding information, communicating with imperfect information, and how that might relate to forming relationships within the game with other players. So Chris, you mentioned Fog of Love. I like this idea of a relationship game that's not as literal as something like Fog of Love. I should play and then we held hands, because I have the feeling that that's a little more abstract. And I really like the concept of getting people, making a low barrier to entry for getting people to do the actions of the game. So I would like to play around with relationships and connecting in games in a lot of different ways. For this one in particular, I'm envisioning something where you play at connections and relationships, and a little bit the way I feel about And Then We Died. You're playing at storytelling, and it gets you to tell a story by degrees, with giving you like just a little piece of inspiration and letting you evolve and work from there. So with something like this, having someone dive right in and be like, okay, we're going to talk about our feelings and connect directly with the reality of another person, but having a lens filter of a character could ease entry. So you're not necessarily talking as yourself. How And Then We Died does this is, well, you're someone who just died, and probably you are not someone who has died as a person playing this game, barring zombie reincarnation shenanigans. So right away, there's a degree of separation there. So if we can envision the people playing this game as something abstract, a block, a rock, a seashell, piece of wood. So potentially having your player marker I'm having trouble drawing blocks today. Usually I'm a lot better at this. Yeah, all right, start more normally. Right, there we go. Block. Yeah, I said seashell. I'm like, how am I going to draw a seashell now? It's a hard thing to draw. Seashell. Stones are also very hard to draw. Piece of sea glass. I have beaches on the mind. It's just some very beachy, oceany things. Maybe because this knotted string here makes me think of a fisherman's net. So right away having that degree of separation by I'm not myself, I'm this physical object. Navigating your relationship as this object. Senior Bob says, so I think what elevates a relationship beyond acquaintances having similar mental wavelengths. I like that you use the word wavelengths there. Oh man, I was like, what was that game I was supposed to prototype that I never got around to? It was the wavelengths game with the sound waves laying over one another. Maybe we could incorporate that into this game somehow. Or something similar. Chris says, also I joked about reducing my weekly playtest feedback to hotter or colder. We give lots of details, but sometimes maybe all the designers need, I like this better than last time, or that was worse. As a sidebar, yeah, for playtesting, getting feedback, I think it's very easy to get too much into the weeds, and people can't, this does tie into what we're talking about now, people can't process that much information at a time. Can only process a limited amount of information at a time. Information presented as chunks. Make sure one piece of information is understood and processed before moving on to the next. And this comes up in education and classrooms as well, right? Where sometimes you'll have classes that go for an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, right? And lectures that you're trying to absorb this fire hose of data streaming into your face, eyeballs, and ears, right? But it takes time to make these connections of how the different pieces of data fit into the larger puzzle. Maybe we can play around with that as well. Senior Bob says, zombie shenanigans is going to be my next game design. Okay. So, what was it? Zombie and reincarnation shenanigans. Yeah, it's all yours. I want to see that. I want to see how that turns out. Game Auto says, secret agents trying to find their contact. Hand out pairs of cards with shapes, etc., and have them chat with each other to try to find the other half of their pair by describing the flavor's sense of their cards. Alright. This is cool. We got a couple of things happening here. I always love where the game starts to sprout and evolve in different directions. This one sounds very discreet and mechanizable. I also love this idea that you can have a multiplayer game where people win in pairs. I've been playtesting some games like this recently, and I think the concept is really cool. I think there's some people out there who will hate it. They always want to have a winner, a tiebreaker, an absolute determination of who has succeeded in this challenge. But I'm excited to break down and play around with that concept. So we could even... Cat, oh my gosh. This cat is very insistent on sticking claws into my back at inopportune times. You want to be on TV. He doesn't want to be on TV. So still coming back to this concept we're talking about of the strings or tokens moving towards each other. It could be a knotted string, or if it were to be a board, trying to think about for different player counts how this would be represented. You could have just different sizes and shapes interlocking. Yeah. Got a pentagon in there. With all these different things having gradations between them. Yeah, I'm not giving up on the string idea. I like playing with string anyways, so just doing that I think would be fun. But you could have your player piece or tokens moving closer or farther away from each other. Around on a board might be a little simpler as a production. Maybe not moving away though. Maybe have the game come to conclusion just by moving closer to your partner. Communicated some shared information. I see this as a multiplayer game, so you always have the two partners, right? You have to always have two neighbors that you're working with. Two neighbors who you're working with to come to resolution. Real time question mark? Information back and forth, maybe in the form of cards, items, drawings, single word clues. And if you come to a consensus, then you get a point moving closer towards each other. Or 2 points, I guess. To a consensus. One thing I think about this concept, these multiple concepts that we're talking about, if it is about relationship building, should there be a failure state? Should there be a loser, quote unquote? Should it be a cooperative game? Something about how the shape appears at the end of the game could represent a snapshot of where we all ended up. Not value judging connection as good or bad, right? Because it does seem like there are some interesting options for competitive gameplay here, and you do want to be making interesting choices as with any game, but maybe the goal, maybe you have different goals. Maybe you have reasons to hide information from someone, or reasons to mislead. Oh, here's a cool idea, going back to the strings that we had before. So we have these knotted strings. Oh, this sounds bizarre and probably not working, but maybe you each have a hidden goal card for the way you want your triangle to look. Hidden goal cards for the shape of your triangle. Still on triangles. We're very triangular today. Each of you is moving towards or away from each other to... makes me think of in the Kids on Bikes role-playing game, when you're creating your relationships amongst your characters, it's not all good or positive relationships. So with every character, you're going to have a good thing and a bad thing. You know, you might have, for example, what will I die defending my character, or what will I die doing for this other character, or how has this character really embarrassed me in the past. And I think it's something interesting to discuss about relationships is every interpersonal relationship has facets to it, right? You're not going to have one relationship where everything is gone perfectly, right? You have a building up over time of, you know, this person did this thing that made me feel very protected and trusting, and maybe this other time they did a different thing that totally threw me off, and made me reconsider how close we actually were. So I like playing around with this and getting to the point where it's not necessarily a zero-sum game. Or also, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Maybe when you move closer towards one character, you have to move away from another character. So there's, like on a linear scale here, tug of war, push and pull. Push and pull, back and forth. Cool, so we have a couple of interesting things evolving from this. Misinterpretations, representing relationships with actual physical distance markers, establishing and strengthening relationships. Could even do the inverse. Trying to make the worst relationship awkward. I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there. Ain't the worst. Trying to get your relationship to a certain point without going farther. Maybe you're only comfortable with a particular level of connection. Game Elder says, played Mayor Cast at Gen Con. I've not heard of this one this year. Super fun relationships in the game. You're all members of the campaign committee for a... Wait, is that... Oh, Mayor Cat. Okay, just got 10 times better. For a campaign committee for a cat, you're trying to get elected, just a regular cat, and you all hate each other but have a shared goal. Yes, please. I want all these things. I want to get a cat elected for something. Oh man, can't even find a link for this. Must be super new. If you do have more information, I'd love to read more about it, 'cause it sounds really cool. Mayor Cat. Yeah, having some tension in what's going on in your game is important. A good push and pull for, if you're looking at the decisions someone will make in your game, what is the reason, you know, that someone might choose to give misinformation? Or is it a pure puzzle game where you're just trying to get the answers that meet the most closely? Another thing potentially do with your markers, there's just more weird ideas coming out, but again, with this, I feel like it would need to be some sort of string or components that move around freely, because your shape is always going to be changing, which is going to be really interesting. But maybe the information you're communicating actually has to do with the components that you choose to play. So maybe you do have a petal, a cube, a meeple, and each item has characteristics, and depending on whether it's more or less similar to the pieces the other people are playing, stuff will move back and forth. It's a little abstract, but I feel like I know what I'm talking about. So people can actually switch out their player markers or their components. Components. Whether they move towards or away from. It's got a little bit of a Gravwell vibe to it, which Corey Young has been posting about on Twitter. It's got this really cool push and pull tension to it. I like this. I'm very connected right now to this idea of physical components, but it might be easier to prototype as you have a card, and then as opposed to being a player interpretation thing, it could list stats, maybe like a crazy rock, paper, scissors vibe to it. So this always moves towards this always moves away from this. Towards this category of thing, away, like a black hole pulls everything towards it. Something very heavy, right? Like a super heavy weight never is pushed or pulled by anything. You get this interesting back and forth. Like, I've been looking at a 3-player game because of the triangles thing, but if you had these strings or things with 4 or more players, you get this interesting thing going on with a ever-evolving shape. So for an end condition for this game, we have some ideas about how the inter-game action will work, but what is the goal here, right? It's all well and good to talk about the things we might do, but there should be some sort of end state that we're trying to get to, even if it's cooperative. It doesn't necessarily have to be someone winning. I had mentioned trying to match a particular picture on goal cards. So maybe the scales here could be simplified. Let's go in that direction a little bit. Gameologist is the second game collection in the Laser Kittens collection. Oh, nice. I have Laser Kittens. It's supposed to be fulfilling its Kickstarter now. Sweet. J92R says, hello. How's the board game going? Board game's going great. We're having very heavy conversations about interpersonal relationships, miscommunications, revealing and hiding the truth from people. So yeah, this is where we're at with board game design, which is super cool. We're talking about some interesting components here, where these lines you see me sketching out are potentially knotted strings that will get closer and farther away as people try to connect or repel other players. Yeah, so say that we had, because here I've got a ton of gradations, which might be a little more tricky to suss out, but if everyone just has 5 between them, so these are at max distance, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, these are a little closer, 2, 3, 4, 5, and these ones, 1, 2, 3, are even closer. And then you could have a goal card here. We're talking about moving these components around. Your endpoints are going to get closer and farther depending on the choices you make, the cards that you play, and then you might have a goal that you're going towards, and this would actually have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 4. So you've achieved your goal based on this card. My first foray into this concept of a goal, I just shown the picture, but ticking it off with the actual numbers on here, you could look at your card and count up the numbers and maybe get to that state with your, get the board state to your particular ideal state. It would be interesting because you only have control over some of the lines. Like you would have control over 2 of the lines in a 3-player game, and there might be a political element. To how you encourage the other players to form the shape. So this doesn't necessarily fit in with our original idea of Misinterpreted Intent, although I still like that title. Line push. Move the knots. Knotted. So this one is a little less about establishing these relationships. This is a little less, more of mechanical interpretation, and a little less of this connection relationship game, which I'm still interested in. And I don't know if it would work with moving closer and farther away from each other. I still like this concept, but it seems like there would be value judgment in that. Based on, it's like, hey, these two, because you have a lot of comparisons you're making, right? Like, if two people are getting closer and closer, and you have this third person who's not getting closer to anyone, you know, there's definitely the opportunity to have people left out of that, which is kind of a bummer. So how can we embody, we'll say, this concept of multiple, and it could be a two-player game, right? Like that, maybe we split this off into two design concepts where one is two players doing a push and pull, and the other one is a more mechanical thing. Connecting and disconnecting without throwing because it's tough, right? Like building relationships, building up your trust, sharing things with people, these are positive things for the most part, right? Disconnecting, like having a disagreement with someone, having a misinterpretation of what someone says, feeling more disconnected from someone, these are all pretty universally negative emotions and experiences. Which is still an interest, it's not necessarily a reason to not make a game out of something, because there's the potential for negative experiences. In fact, a game could be an interesting space as long as it was reinforced that it was a game, that everyone was very clear on the boundaries between the game and actual people's emotions. It could be an interesting space to explore connection and disconnection. Chris says, negative experiences and emotions are often some of the strongest sources of personal growth. Yeah, I like that. Not exactly the tagline for the back of an entertainment product box, but true. You know, we're talking about game design here. I guess the idea behind a lot of what we're working on is that it will be for entertainment, that it will be fun in some way, but there's no reason that everything we create has to be 100% about creating positive emotions. Makes me think of a game I played recently called, is it the Keeping On? Holding On. I'm like, why can't I remember the name of that? Holding On, The Troubled Life of Billy Kerr. Like, that was about exploring these difficult, complicated emotions. And even a lot of role-playing games. I think a lot of the fun of role-playing games comes from connecting, making stronger bonds with people, but based on your interactions with other people in your party, you can also have some really interesting tensions that build up and will need to be addressed at some point. And it makes for sitting on the edge of your seat action, right? If you never know when a certain conflict is going to explode with a character, or with a player character, or with a non-player character, it increases your engagement, having that uncertainty there. Chris, yeah, absolutely. Games don't have to be fun. Games can be about uncomfortable things, as long as there is clarity and consent and such. Absolutely. Okay, so we have this very interesting, like this, the moving the lines and making the shapes, like that's a pretty solid concept right there, with a kind of abstract, not totally, like not huge necessarily needing a theme, but a lot of fun stuff to play around with mechanically. Also this concept of a complex emotional relationship navigation game. Potentially using this same idea of moving towards and away from each other. But how could we make positivity out of the negativity? Even like towards and away, that almost feels like a value thing, right? It seems very black and white, right? Is there a way that we can have potentially a more free form movement, maybe like a grid, or I'm thinking like a Chinese checkers board. And so you have the potential for movement in different axes, which might work better for this style of a game. Man, I wish I had Chinese checkers now for to be able to mock something up. But this, just using any sort of a grid, or this would be easy enough to prototype something like this with just different dots and spaces that you're going to. So maybe your characters start at the edges, and then you're trying to move like towards, away, or around. Put some more spaces, multiple spaces that people can go to. So I think the important thing here, which was potentially missing from our earlier prototype ideas for the complex emotional game, multiple axes of movement. And this creates an interesting space of a kind of ballet of emotional navigation. Potentially adding a fair amount of complexity to what's going on here. So for this grid with multiple directions, you can move in relation to other players, towards, away. Shoot, what's the term? Orthogonal? To the side. We'll say kind of like a neutral movement, which is a little different mechanically from no movement. Right, Chris says, some people explore deep feelings with role-playing games. Some people slash their way through monsters. Neither is wrong, but not knowing what you're getting into is a problem. Yes, absolutely. This is very different ways of playing. Email says, when you're triangulating, one of the ways you make the triangle smaller is to go to a new sampling point or points and taking bearings from there. What if each sampling point was a different question or topic? If one set of topics didn't help you get closer, pick different ones to try. Yeah, I think that feeds into this whole hotter, colder vibe as well. You might be digging into a subject. Maybe you're asking questions or just making statements. And a character could be responding with no movement or just neutral movement, signaling that you should move on to another topic. So for this one, we've come up with some interesting goals / end conditions for the more rope-based game. For this one, it'd be interesting to think about what your goal or end condition would be. Or maybe you just get through a certain number of topics and observe, sit back and observe the end state. So instead of having a win-loss condition, you have a moment of reflection, tying it back to what we were talking about at the very beginning of the stream, which I love. Reflection, not judgment. So it's not judgment assessing, oh, did we achieve our goal? But instead, dispassionate observation and processing. And again, this doesn't necessarily have to be like super personal and emotional where I'm pinging you with things that you think or feel or might be very passionate or very dispassionate about. You know, it could still be a role-playing thing. Where you take on the persona of your player piece so you can play with a level of separation that hopefully makes people more comfortable with the game. Chris says, triangulating in this context has me thinking of that new Treasure Island game. Haven't played yet, want to, but instead of a treasure map, it's a feelings map. Oh my gosh, I love it. We're digging up our feelings. We're digging up our feelings, getting to the core of our emotions. Instead of treasure, it was feels the whole time. Gasp. I'm now half thinking of Inside Out and half thinking of a Jump to Conclusions Matt. Oh my gosh. Just finished Children of Time book, do recommend, and representing this as a spider web spiral is very on point. Yeah. Yeah, that's cool. I've been looking a lot at circular ideas in gameplay recently, which is kind of weird, but interesting. Interested to explore that more. Yeah. Now we come to the part of the stream is like, watch as Emma struggles to open her pen. I keep closing it because I don't want the ink to dry out, but yeah. Instead of having a rigid hex pattern here, we have our spider web, which is interesting. Because presumably you'd only be able to move inwards along the axes. If you had moved out to a center point, for example, like this concept of navigating a web that's not equidistant between all the points. How does that work, right? It's got some interesting crunchiness to it. This is the part of the stream where we just draw dots. This is part of the stream where I feel like I'm channeling Bob Ross. Some happy little dots Doesn't matter. Doesn't have to be perfect. You know, there are no mistakes, just happy little accidents. Spiderweb. Spiderweb's kind of scary, creepy connotations, except maybe dew on a spider web. A seashell. I'm okay with spiders. They eat other bugs, but some people are kind of anti-spiders, so that's something to consider in prototyping a game. Senior Bob, orthogonal, bird adjacent. Ornithogonal? Yes. Was bird biologist, can confirm. Oh my gosh, I love it. Responding with no movement. In response to responding with no movement. Never have I ever. I think actually, coming back to this idea of no, I don't, like, one of the reasons I like this more freeform movement space no option for standing still. Because this idea of standing still is I have no reaction to what just happened. One thing I'm very excited about this topic for is continuous movement. No backwards movement. There's a flow, and based on continuous input of information, the board state keeps changing. Ooh, another idea. So this is a very structural idea here, right? All structures are somewhat rigid. So potential direction there, but what if it was completely freeform? I'm thinking about this in part because I just got some more foam core boards to play around with. What if you just had your board completely blank and you had, I'm like, do I have push pins? I want something like push pins to be able to represent this. Maybe I could use penny pins because I have a lot of those lying around. But you're in your board, you have no lines, and all you can do is move like in any direction. No lines, no grid, no rules. And that opens up an interesting space for degrees of movement and how different players in different groups interpret. Like, that would be really fascinating to see, right? Maybe some groups would make big sweeping movements. Maybe you do one thing and I'd go all the way and be right next to you. Or everyone would group their pieces right next to each other. Blank piece of foam core with push pins, or even like a blank piece of fabric with Mancala stones on it, and see where people end up. I think there's something very communicative and emotional about giving people complete freedom of motion. Motion with an 8 in it. Gameballer says, why am I visualizing a pair of battleship-style player boards with spiderweb patterns and a single peg seeking out its mate? Oh my gosh, I love that too. Oh, so many good ideas today. Trying to come... Oh, yeah. Oh, that's so good. And that comes back to what we were saying about the partial information and being a cooperative game. Imperfect communication, that just seems like such a beautiful game concept where you can only you're like fighting through the snowstorm trying to find your soulmate, but you can't tell them exactly where they are. It's such a intense spiritual connection experience. I love it. Chris says, okay, sending message to R3. Ack, you sunk my relationship. Battleship. Sending text message. I didn't receive your text message. Why did you never text me back? You never text... Why didn't you text me back? You never text me back. You always ignore my communications. No, I don't. My phone was out of batteries, I swear. Oh, there's so much fun stuff to explore and unpack there. Ugh. This has felt like a really powerful session. Thank you so much for everybody for joining me today. I feel like we came up with some amazing ideas. I love the sessions where I have like 3 or 4 different things that I want to prototype based on what we've talked about here. And I got the spider web, I got the blank board freeform movement idea, I got these knotted strings with these pictures of how things are supposed to line up. Yeah, I was trying to find a way that I could merge relationship and battleship. Batationship. Rebattleship. Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to play around with that. There's a good title in there somewhere. We can figure that out. I hope this creative brainstorming session was as useful for you all as it was for me. I always have a blast doing this. I feel like my creative juices just come pouring out with the help of all you fine folk. If you see anything here that sparks your own creativity, feel free to take it and run with it. Ideas don't belong to anyone. I am definitely taking a lot of ideas here, building them up, disassembling them, taking them apart, seeing where they end up. One of the important things about board game design in general, is your ideas usually don't survive their first contact with reality. So the first time you get this in front of someone, they have the opportunity to play around with it, it's likely to fall completely apart, but from the ashes, new and better ideas will emerge. So this isn't meant to create the final form of games. If I took this and prototyped it and played it, it would probably be completely different. The experience would be completely different from what any of us was expecting. But yeah, it's a great place to start with ideas, to come up with ideas, to evolve ideas, and just get your brain working and chomping on all the different kinds of things that you want to make. Yeah, so I think that's going to be it for today. I'm going to... like, I have so many games that I'm working on now. I was just talking with friends last week about this weekly session, how I'm trying to prototype more of the stuff, and at the same time work on all the prototypes from previous sessions and all of the games that I've been building out unrelated to these design sessions. So I got a lot of games going on, which is great because I want to get more things out there and percolating and potentially do more just print and play games, low cost print and play games, getting things out there for people to play around with and experiment with, because I just want to get more stuff out in the world. I think that we come up with really cool ideas, and I'd love to see stuff come of those. I think it's important to get stuff out there, especially if you're doing board game design. If you're going through traditional publication channels, it can take a very long time for finished, printed versions to get into people's hands. So I'm very excited to explore new ways to circumvent that process, still have stuff in the traditional channels, but also play around and see if we can get some more informal, fun things out into the world, which is super fun. Blue on him makes me think of missed connections. Yeah, absolutely. I'm gonna add this into our notes too, 'cause some more stuff to chew on. Missed connections. Searching for blue peg that was last seen sailing across the ocean. Alright, so for upcoming streams, we are probably going to maybe have the stream on Friday. I have to double check with my schedule for that. Next Tuesday, I'm going to be doing a panel for PAX Dev, which is just around the corner, which is crazy. I'm not ready. Doing a bunch of panels for PAX Dev. If you're going to be here in Seattle, definitely come check that out. Also be doing panels for PAX West and just generally around hanging out if you're in the area. So I might have a little bit of a disrupted stream schedule for next week, but I'll be sure to post with updates for what's happening. As always, it's been a blast. Thank you so much for joining my stream. Don't forget to follow and subscribe if you want more cool content. You can also chat to me on Twitter at Emma Larkins. Always happy to think about, talk about, and share ideas on design. That's it for today. Be sure to catch you again soon in the future. See you around the table. Bye.